Welcome to this episode of Midlife Men with me, Philip Briscoe. My guest today is Dan Flanagan. Dan is firstly a father, he's a self-confessed part-time revolutionary, and he's also the founder of Dad La Soul. Dad La Soul is an award-winning social impact organisation which really focuses on tackling social isolation for dads. So Dan, welcome.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, depending on what time you're probably listening to this.
Good to have you here. So, Dan, I'm going to hand straight over to you to talk about how it all started.
Way back when. So, I suppose, as you mentioned, Dad La Soul's we're a multi-award winning social enterprise, and I set it up about 7 years ago. So, prior to that, my career was in digital PR. And I was a senior analyst for a very swanky media firm. And on paper, I kind of had it all. So I had the nice young family, house in the suburbs, commuted in. But I was really, really unhappy and really stressed. I found myself, I'd be awake before my son was awake. And then I'd be spending a couple of hours on the train up to the city. If I was lucky, I'd get home to put him to bed. But even at that time, I hate to really admit it, I was probably on my BlackBerry. That's how shows how old this was, answering client emails because that's what I thought my role was as a provider. And there was a few other things happening in the background. Yeah, my dad was very ill at the time. He had vascular dementia, so he was going rapidly downhill. So I was trying to juggle all of these roles. And I became very ill myself. Also at that time, I was maybe struggling with being a dad. I was looking for support and there was none. It was all geared towards mummy, going back from even to the NCT classes that we went to. It was all around, how do you support your wife or your partner through breastfeeding, which is very important. Don't get me wrong. Nobody warned me, okay, by the way, you're going to be in the hospital and the woman you love is going to have essentially really traumatic surgery. And there's nothing you're going to do, right? There's nothing you can do. Also, nobody's going to bother to ask your name. The midwife doesn't really care. You're there to make tea. They don't care about your emotions. And it just sort of, this was all going on and it just made me angry. I'd go to mother and baby classes and I'd be treated like an outsider. There was, what were you doing there on a Monday morning? Didn't you have a proper job? Were you there to have an affair? Probably a paedophile, because that's the only reason a man would want to hang around with kids, And this is not a million years ago, And it just, it made me angry. And I just thought, if you don't want us, there must be something that does. And it was like the old adage of it. If it ain't there, you best build it. So I started doing a playdate. I did one on about 7-8 years ago now. I convinced a mate of mine to give us his office in Brighton for the week, for the Saturday. Brought in some DJ decks, soft play, put a call out on social media. We had 14 dads and 20 kids turn up. Very lax understanding of health and safety back then, I must admit, Kids went nuts, properly nuts. But what I realised is that all these guys were sat around talking. Nobody was on their mobile phones feeling awkward. And I reflected that the only other time I was normally with other dads would be like a kid's birthday party. And you'd be dragged along and forced into a conversation with parents. And it's the mums a takeover, the dads a withdraw. And you just have these terrible conversations about what football team you support or what car you're driving and just feel massively socially awkward. And it's like, I'm onto something here. I don't know what it is, but it's something. It's grown from there.
And what was the sort of in those first few years? What impact did that have on your mental health? I mean, did this impact build over time? Feeling more and more isolated, I guess, from parenting.
Yeah, I became actually very ill. So I ended up getting chickenpox for the second time as an adult, which is, chickenpox is nasty as a kid. As a grown up, you get itches in very odd places. But what they did, it made me confined to barracks for about 3 weeks. I literally could not work and I had to stop. But it was during that time that I probably played with my son more than I'd done in months because I was never around. I was always working. I genuinely thought that was my role. So yeah, the idea is that I suppose once I recovered from the chicken pox, I realised how ill I was, and I resigned from that corporate job. I thought I can't go back. The idea was to maybe have 2 or 3 months off. I was also dealing with my dad had passed away, so I was trying to deal with the grief very badly. I did a typical bloke thing of ignored it and went straight back to work because I had priorities, and everything had built up. I genuinely think I was on the verge of a breakdown, and it was the chicken box that came along and literally forced me to stop. Otherwise, I don't think I would have.
So there was so on top of all of these, individual traumas, was the kind of underlying feeling that you weren't, being as part or recognised as part of your offspring's life as perhaps you should have been.
I think there was also, I built up fatherhood in my head, and people have these visions of what life should be because of social media, and I should be this and I should be that, and I constantly felt like I was failing. Right, I tried to measure myself to these impossible KPIs that I'd self set. It's ridiculous. I'm always going to fail, but I was showing up and I was trying. But then I was looking for support, and there was nothing out there. So I actually started a blog about it. And that took off. That became an online magazine, and we had sort of 18 dads writing. That then became the world's first agency of dad, which was a PR agency. But suddenly there were lots of brands that wanted to play with us. So I thought I was spinning many plates, but still constantly feeling quite lonely and isolated. You could be in the middle of a party and still not really have people to properly talk to.
And did you talk to your partner about this, or other, relatives or close friends?
No, not. I would have seen it at the time as a sign of weakness. Absolutely not the way I was brought up. We just, whatever life throws you, shut up and you get on with it. I've got broad shoulders. My job is to protect everybody else around me. And why? What did I have to worry about? I had the nice house, the good job, blah, blah, blah. I did everything society told me to be. If anything, I was whinging, then that's a lot of sort of first world privilege to do that. But I didn't realise that actually it doesn't matter where you are in society, you can have these stresses, and they really hurt. They really struggle. It's only now, years later, that I can realise I went through some pretty, horrific experiences, and I certainly didn't give myself justice. It was my now ex-wife who convinced me to quit that job, because I think she was seeing the effect of me coming home every night and being drained, and having them to paint a smile and go back to the office on a Monday. But it was the guilt and the shame. I had nothing, they say the worst job in the world, right, is a rat catcher in Mumbai. But, that rat catcher might have a really nice life. He might have a lovely family to go home to, might be really happy. There's a lot of privilege. What did I have to moan about? So, yeah, I didn't talk to anybody, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why I also became very, very ill.
And did you assume then that all other dads were having this amazing inclusive experience and fulfilling their parental, their expectations of the parental dream?
You've hit the nail on it. Honestly, I thought everybody had it sorted, and it must be me. I was failing. Why was I failing? Why was my child so unlucky to have me as a parent? And that's part of that. In the early stages, Before this corporate job, when my son was born, I'd started my first business. I was working really, really hard to build something, and the business failed, and I nearly got made bankrupt. And it took me to a very dark place, and I was literally considering, why was my son so unlucky to have such a failure as a parent? And I went to without being a trigger warning, I went to the darkest of darkest places. That level of shame, that level of guilt, it's terrible.
So what you went to a pretty dark place, as you said. What was the kind of turning point or trigger, if you like, for you to think, I can't feel like this anymore, I'm going to do something about it? Was it starting the blog?
Yeah, I think that was a relief. So after the bankruptcy, or near bankruptcy, I ended up going back and getting a corporate job. So at least the salary was taken care of. But then I had a lot to prove. And I was a lot to be thankful for, It was probably after the chicken box and not going back. The idea was have 3 months off, recover, take stock of life. But actually the universe started working in my favour. I think 3 weeks into my sabbatical, I ended up getting a freelance contract for a music promoter. So my job was to interview music stars from the 90s. So I got to hang out and kind of see the fun-loving criminals, songbook collected. As a man with a midlife crisis, being a rock journalist, it worked. It really worked. And I was being paid for it. But it also meant I could do this, the nursery runs as per school runs and really be an active part of my son's life. And there was a moment, I think it was a couple of weeks in, I started volunteering in his nursery school, and I got treated like a rock star because none of the kids were used to having a man in there. So I'd go in there and have these 3 or 4 year olds all think I'm Jesus, which was wonderful for the ego. But we're very fortunate. We live down on the south coast. So they have a thing called beach school where you take the entire class out down to the sea. And I had these with some other grown-ups. Obviously, they wanted to give me these kids. But I had my son, a big group of his friends. It was a Monday morning. And I said, right, we're going to go dinosaur hunting. And they all brought into it. And it was so much fun. And even now, my son's a 12-year-old with the hairs in odd places and a deep voice. He still remembers that. And as working weeks go, that was a pretty good one, because previous life I would have been in a status meeting for a large financial client surrounded by people I didn't like, trying to sell a project I didn't like, didn't believe in. And the world doesn't need to be this adage of almost being tied to a 9 to 5 and being used by slave masters. We don't need to subscribe to that way of thinking anymore.
So how did you move them from your experience, going in and volunteering at the children's group to the next kind of phase, I guess, of your journey?
There was, around that time, we'd moved along the coast to a lovely place called Worthing, where I'm still based now, quite away from Brighton. And the Worthing's gorgeous, right? They had these beautiful old venues, but they had very little activities for people of our generation. So I hit on the idea, I called it Tot Rocking Beats. And we started putting on afternoon raves for families. But we can't go out in the evening because nobody can get a babysitter. And also we're too tired to go in the evening. I don't want to always go to kids' parties. So, we ended up selling, I think, 30 different events in museums and theatres. That was my stepping stone for a huge afternoon raves, which was a lot of fun.
And was this predominantly focused on dads?
The whole family. The youngest we had was a 3-month-old baby. The oldest was a 97-year-old. So we'd invite the entire community, because I realised everybody's got the same issue. Us as young parents can't go out in the evening because we'll get babysitter. The elderly can't go out because maybe they don't have family nearby. We work with a wonderful project called Stay Up Wait, which is for adults with learning difficulties. Again, if you're 20 and you want to go raving, but you've got Downs, you can't because your support worker clocks off at like 7 o'clock. So we would bring every spectre of the community together on the dance floor, have it large, but then we'd all be home by bath and bedtime.
And so how did that move into Dad La Soul then?
Well, I was doing these events, having on the surface a whale of a time. But then on a Saturday, which is traditionally a dad day, I'd be down the park and I'd be lonely because, mums can go up and make conversations. I'd take the soft play and just be surrounded by people on their phones. And I just thought, I've got this DJ equipment and I've got this soft play from the raves. What happens if I just do it on a small version on a Saturday morning and maybe make some friends? Because as a middle-aged man, nobody wants to put their hand up and go, hello, I feel like a Billy No Mates. Yeah. I had friends and we had friends, but I had nobody I could really have honest conversations about or with. Yeah, I was very, very socially isolated, which is ironic considering I threw raves for a living.
So you were still feeling quite low and, and your experience of a dad was not necessarily still not the one you hoped for.
I was still beating myself up because I'd set these, what I assumed was levels of perfection. But yeah, then I just realised that there must be more people like me. And there was. And now we've got thousands of them in our community. We've got Dad La Soul in New York, New Zealand, the Czech Republic, Germany. And it's a generation of men that feel exactly the way I do in a sleepy town in West Sussex.
So you're bringing all these men, all these dads together, and helping with feelings of isolation. But I guess predominantly it's about just sharing experiences and realizing you're not the only one.
It's kind of what I hit about. First of all, it was about entertainment. So I just wanted something to do on a Saturday that meant I wasn't bored and my son wasn't bored. Okay. I'm good with ideas. But what I've realised is that we're a Trojan horse, because if I said, middle-aged men, hello, come over here and talk about your feelings, you'll go, Dad, sounds like a terrible idea. See you later. Bye-bye. I'll say, look, come over here and do a DJ workshop, or we're going to do a filmmaking workshop. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Oh, that sounds quite interesting. The fellas come through the door with or without their children. Then they make that connection, and then the stuff comes out. And I mean, literally everything. And because we're a dad's organisation, we're not just a group of angry single dads. We have guys that are happily married, co-parents, stay-at-home dads, single parents, dads that have adopted, dads that have gone through miscarriage, guys that are struggling with IVF, granddads. Our youngest is 15. He's still at school doing his GCSEs and he's got a 6-month-old baby. And our oldest is 75. We've got dads that are unemployed. We've got dads that are very, very successful, should we say. And we come from all of these different backgrounds, but the commonality is that DAD. That brings it all together.
And so, as the whole movement kind of started to grow, what did you learn from it? I mean, how did that impact the way that you grew the business and the sorts of things that you offered?
I don't know how. I just did more. There was never, up until literally this year, there's never been a business plan. I have an idea. I'll just go and do it and almost will my way to success. But it's a real struggle. As a not-for-profit, there's less funding available. The funding that is available is even more competitive. Some of the funders are reporting something like a 3,000% increase in levels of applications. And we work on there's a national average of about 1 in 30. So for every 30 charity bids we put in, we'll get 1. In any other business, you said that was a ratio you'd be working from the sales forecasting point of view. They go, you're on the wrong business, But we do that because I fundamentally believe that, the level of entertainment that we put on the community, I could charge a fortune for. Literally, we are going Willy Wonka sometimes, but it should be the families who are on low or low wage that could, be able to do it. So we have a very low door policy ticket level, and if you can't afford it, doesn't matter, you can still come. So I'm never going to be a rich man. That's why we need but it's almost the families that are greatest in need are the ones that, again, genuinely would need it and more benefit from it.
And what sort of feedback do you get from dads that come along?
They love it. We literally save lives. There's a community there, and I think there is the range of conversations we've been privy to, everything from dealing with childhood sexual abuse, dads that are in recovery. We've got lots of pockets. So, best to describe. Do you remember the film The Gremlins? Right. If you fed the gremlins after a certain time, they start popping up. So this is what Dad the Soul's done. So we'll put on our big events, but then pockets and friendship groups within that community will go. So we've got dads that get up at 5:30 in the morning, run 5K, and go sea swimming. I've just come back actually from the sea swimming group. Lunchtime, we've got a pub quiz team. We've got a five-a-side team. We've got guys that are into nature walking. And there's all these other things people are finding a value with.
And why do you think you need to exist at all? What are the problems, in our society, I guess, that mean that men are feeling isolated, in their own experiences of fatherhood?
I think we're lost as a generation. I think there is a huge change in what it means to be a man. The relationships and role models that we had are probably very different to the role models that we give our kids. My dad was a man's man. He wouldn't give us a cuddle, wouldn't have told us he loved us. I know he did, but we just didn't have that kind of relationship. But I co-parent now, and my son's a couple of months' time, he's going to be taller than me. But every time I see him, I make sure I give him a hug and I tell him I love him. I kiss him goodnight. I don't care. I think generationally, so that there has been a change in who we are as men, as we've got to be providers, but we've also got to be hands-on, emotionally resilient, loving and caring, not afraid to change your nappy. And I think it's difficult for a lot of blokes. They just don't have those role models. There will still be the cases that if you took when your kids were a lot younger, all the changing facilities are in women's toilets. If you take your kids out, you're still going to say, "Oh, aren't you a good boy for giving mummy a day off? Oh, you're babysitting." And they go, "No, I think it's called parenting." The UK paternity leave laws, right? They're minimal compared to most of our European cousins. So there's a lot of work to do. And I don't think it's a battle of the sexes here, because we fundamentally support, women's rights to, advance their career and smash the patriarchy and smash the glass ceilings. Absolutely. To be able to help do that, can we take more of the caring role, please, and not be judged about it or, seen as lesser? There's still an abject lack of men in early years education. Where are these strong, positive male role models?
So it's do you think it's a period of flux at the moment and a bit of confusion? Do you think it will start to, sort itself out, start to become a more of a, I guess, an equal landscape in terms of parenting?
I would hope so. I think there's a lot of work being done. There's still a lot of work to be done. And I've got to be careful that I don't live in some self-righteous guardian media bubble where everybody is right on. But most of the dads that I know are trying to be better. Yeah, they are really good. And this is down to even, there's a couple of lads that are co-parents, right? So, but they're the best friends. So one of them goes out with the other guy's ex-wife. And normally, traditionally, that would be a hell of a horrible relationship. But they put their ego aside. What's best for this child? Best child is that she sees us, together, and there's no tension at the door. And stuff. So they've got like keys to each other's houses and stuff. It is a beautiful utopian level of co-parenting, but it's like, well, shit, tell me how you do that. I want to learn as a co-parent how to do that. So there's this huge, quite consequential knowledge share that's going on between these fellas over a pint, over a cup of tea, over a chat about, why the Stone Roses are the best band ever,
And how's your experience, of setting up this organisation? How's that affected you and your view on your own personal experience, with your children?
I think it's been a gift, a really, really gift. And it's only as I get older that I understand this. I can have some very honest conversations with my son. But it's he's been brought up being dragged to our events. I'd set up so him and I could play together. Actually, in quite a lot of those events, him and I did not play together because I'd be helping somebody else out. But I think he's seen, and I think he's probably listened to, there's quite a lot of podcasts and stuff out there where I've discussed this, his early years and the struggles. He's very aware of how difficult that I used to find it. But I'm able to have a conversation with him. I say, I didn't know. I just didn't. But actually, through this point, I've learned. And I've sought this knowledge. And actually, I want to give you this knowledge and I want to give you these skills. So going forward, you are more emotionally resilient. And you are more emotionally intellectual. The idea of any kind of emotion as a kid, unless it was anger or laughter, was seen as weak. I can't use the terms that we would call each other, but you just, and God forbid I was being labelled as, it's the Beano. I didn't want to be Walter the Softy, put it that way. I wanted to be Dennis.
And you think that's changing now? I mean, obviously through the work that you're doing, but do you think generally it's changing? Or is it still quite widespread?
I think there's, depending on where you are in the country, I think there's probably geographical restrictions. I know there's different struggles within different faith groups, because in certain communities, you don't look your dad in the eye because it's a massive sign of disrespect. But every other child psychologist would say from an early age, you get down on your hands and knees and have eye-to-eye contact with that child and rough and tumble. So I think there are still a lot of differences. And there's still a lot of work and better understanding could be done. I think there is a change. And I think last 7 years, we've had over 12,000 families through the door. So I could say probably from a decent level of data, there is change going on. Yeah.
So what advice, Dan, would you give to somebody who's perhaps listening to this or knows somebody that's feeling like you did, in the early days when you're feeling, strung out, very unhappy, not able to really juggle what's required of you, and feeling, increasingly isolated as a parent? What advice would you give to someone?
First of all, you need to acknowledge it. I literally put it out there and admit that you're struggling. Nobody's going to think worse of you. In fact, the strength and the courage is admitting that you've got an issue. It's the same thing. If your washing machine breaks down, you phone a plumber. Your car breaks down, you take your car in for an MOT. If you're struggling, go and seek some level of support, whether that be, from a GP or professional services. I'm a huge advocate of counselling, therapy. And the other thing is, join a community like ours, because if you've got a group of pals that you can put your hand up and go, you know what, this thing that I'm dealing with is really tough and I don't know what to do, mate. So first of all, they can listen to you, but through their experience, it literally will be, I don't mean this glibly, but there's almost a Me Too moment, because then, yeah, I get it. Absolutely. Me Too. And you go, but you've got the 10-bedroom house on the hill. How can you have that problem? And you almost get rid of that big bag of worries when you realise that you are genuinely not alone. And to be honest, your partner will thank you for it. Your kids will definitely benefit from it. And ultimately, you will be a happier, more well-rounded individual. But again, I'm unhappy. I want to change, but I don't know how. Okay, first thing, let's go and have a look what's out there. And I need to, for Dad the Soul, our thing, it's a bit like AA, you got to be brave to take that first step. But once you do, through the door, suddenly you realise that there are so many other fellas in exactly the same position that can give you a shoulder to cry on or tell you an absolutely crap joke. Well, apart from me, obviously, because my goats are quality, and might just give you a more involved social life.
And I think what you said earlier is that a lot of men will not want to kind of go and speak to someone and say, in the context of I'm feeling depressed or think I've got some mental health issues, it'll be more around, as you said, the sorts of things that Dad La Soul put on. So like a kind of music event or something which has an alternative draw, but actually once you're there, then that's when you find like-minded.
Yeah, that's when the work begins, and it is a Trojan horse. There are lots of other group therapies out there, and that might be suitable. People, things like Andy's Man Club, are incredibly successful with what they do on a Monday night. But do I want to sit around in a circle? Not really. But that's just me. I'd rather do some activities, and then when I'm ready, over the pool table or over the board game, talk about something. But everybody's different.
So the advice is go and have a look and see what's out there locally, and then you can, make an informed decision as to what might suit you.
Yeah, it might be that you've got to try lots of different things before. I don't think, if I do this one thing, all my worries and woes are going to disappear. Because probably, if you're struggling, it's because of different reasons. It could be your health and nutrition. There could be other factors there. It could be issues within your relationship, or I'm a whisper away from turning 50, so I've got this big thing of, oh my God, type of worry. So it's probably a mixture of a few different things. But what you can do is, if you, and I mean this bluntly, get off your backside. I am not happy with the situation. I want to change. So Dad La Soul exists because one day I put a flag in the hill. I'm not having this anymore. I'm not going to mother and baby groups and feeling this terrible. Right? Just not doing it. So if you can use maybe that a bit of level of gumption to go, I'm 45 years old and I don't want to feel like this anymore. There are some really good, fun, accessible, financially accessible resources that you can draw down on. And go, you know what? I think the rest of this year wants to be different than the last 6 months, please.
Great. So your organisation's doing well. It's growing from strength to strength. In fact, I saw just the other day you had some really nice, a really nice story on the BBC News website. So what's next?
As an organisation, as a not-for-profit, I don't like that term, not-for-profits, actually. It's like profit for purpose. It's tough out there. So at the beginning of the year, we had this lovely team away day and a plan, and the big picture is dadless souls physically in towns and cities across the UK. So we were looking at least 10 new locations this year. The cold hard reality, it's so tough out there. If we're here in 3 or 4 months, that will be a result. So I've almost had to deal with the disappointment of that. But, with even just look at your local high street, the amount of organisations and businesses are going under because it is tough out there. The costs are right through the roof. So we are working on different alternatives, different funding models, different business models potentially. But I've got what's really lovely is that I've had inquiries from Germany, New Zealand. Monday this week, I had an inquiry from a Dutch dad going, can we have dadless soul here? How do you do it? And that's what I want. I want to build a model that can almost be drag and dropped as a social franchise. So for any of these fellas that might be listening, go, you know what? I'd like to do something, but I maybe don't know how. So, well, I've been doing this for the last 7 years. We are now the leading organisation of its kind in the UK and probably top 3 worldwide. I've got all this knowledge and its experience in these war rooms. I just need to be able to package it all up and go, here you go, fellas, drag and drop, Newcastle, Berlin. And I would love that, get to a stage where I'm removed from the day-to-day operations, because this is now my full-time job after 6 years of volunteering in the evenings and weekends. Quite a stressful day job. I would like to see out my dotage literally travelling around other countries, setting up dadless souls in here, there and everywhere.
Great. Well, look, I wish you all the luck, Dan. Thank you for sharing your story and talking about dadless soul, and wish you the best of luck. Thank you for listening to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. You can find out more about Dan and Dadless Soul by visiting the organisation's website, www.dadlesssoul.com. If you have a story to tell and you think your experience would help others, then please get in contact with me either by the website, mid-lifemen.com, or email me at midlifemen01@gmail.com. Finally, please share the podcast with people you know and with your networks. If you enjoy listening, then please rate or like the podcast to help raise its profile and reach more people who might benefit from the stories shared by my guests.